the Nissan R35 GTR. It's been discontinued, unfortunately, but they also produced these for over 15 years, so there's so many of them on the market, and I've only driven 2 of these prior to today, and both of them just absolutely blew me away with just how dynamically engaging and fun to drive they were. So it's time to revisit this car and drive it for the 3rd time in isolation, since all the previous videos were comparison tests, and see if this car is still one of the most fun driver's cars that can be bought used for less than $80,000. Now, that does come with a caveat because this is a 2012 model year, which is the first facelifted version of the many versions of R35 GTR. That means this gets an extra 45 horsepower over the original 2008 model year, giving this 530 horsepower and 488 pound-feet of torque. We still have this 6-speed dual clutch transmission, and this car is super heavy, over 3,800 pounds. That extra weight does not mean this car is not a very dynamically capable machine, even on a back road. This car is owned by my buddy Oleg, and it just has 9,000 miles on it. He bought this not long ago, and it barely has any mods, just Whiteline sway bars, Yokohama AD09 tires in stock sizes, and EBC Blue Stuff pads. As I mentioned, for the 2012 facelift, you can pick these up for around $70,000 to $80,000. If you get one of the pre-facelift versions, I've seen them go for as low as $55,000 to $60,000 with higher miles. And even today, this car is a technological powerhouse. We have this Atessa ETS all-wheel drive system, which uses electronic sensors and hydraulically actuated clutches to split torque front and rear and left to right. And because this does have a transaxle layout, it's mostly a rear drive biased all-wheel drive system, and it can actually send up to 98% of engine torque to the rear axle. The most it can send to the front is 50%. And since this is the facelifted model, not only does it get the extra 45 horsepower, but it also has revised, stiffer suspension and restyled front and rear bumpers. And I gotta say, from the outside, this car still has a lot of presence to it. It's not sleek or svelte or even low. In fact, the seating position, as low as it'll go, I still feel like I'm sitting very upright and high relative to the car. The interior is very basic, but despite what many people criticized about this interior, I actually think it feels decent for the money. We do get some nice stitched leather, some faux carbon fiber trim here, and of course, analog controls and switches for everything. Very purposeful 3-spoke steering wheel, and I love these 3 switches for the different modes. We have transmission on the left, the electronic dampers in the middle, and traction control on the right. Double wishbone front, multi-link rear suspension. Let's see how this thing drives. Love the analog gauges with the tach right in the middle. Manual handbrake. We're gonna put it into manual mode. Love that we get engine oil, trans oil, and coolant temp. We're gonna throw everything into R mode, and away we go. This particular car, over 12 years old. Let's see if it feels 12 years old. Oh my goodness. VR38 DETT engine, heavily boosted, quite a bit of lag down low, but it explodes towards the top of the rev range. Whoa, sensitive throttle. Oh my goodness. I don't love these EBC pads. I'm sure Oleg is going to switch these out once he starts modding this car. But even then, in basically stock form, it just feels like a big rear-wheel drive car that has surprising traction coming out of corners. This all-wheel drive system is one of my favorites in any car because it's so rear biased. Wow. Steering feel for days. This is not digital in terms of the front end feel. There's so much feedback through the wheel. You can feel all the little bumps. The steering is also quite heavy. Just an absolute powerhouse. This car bullies the road into submission. That's how multiple reviewers have described it, but I really do think that's an accurate assessment of how this feels behind the wheel. It just claws for traction in a way that you wouldn't think possible for a car with not very big tires. We can't review a GTR without doing launch control, right? It is not easy on the clutches during launch control. I can see why these 6-speed dual clutch transmissions are known to have clutch overheating issues if you launch it too often. It's so violent. No mechanical sympathy. I love the way this car rotates on throttle. Oh yes. I can just feel that all-wheel drive system helping me keep the rear end in check. Just giving us that little bit of yaw to help the car turn. Very quick downshifts. The upshifts are actually still quick for such an old transmission. Not as snappy as a modern dual clutch or PDK from a Porsche, but still feels very capable. I love the R35 GTR. It is so fun. People call this digital, but in this day and age, this is about as analog of a car without a manual transmission as you can get. So much response, so much feedback from the steering. The car feels raw. You feel so much through the chassis. These seats aren't the best. Again, they're mounted way too high up, and there's not a ton of bolstering, especially for your thighs. So you do kind of have to hold on mid-corner because this car generates so much mid-corner grip. This twin-turbo V6 makes a very unique sound, even stock. It's not an exotic sound by any means, but you'll know when a GTR is pulling up. Column-mounted paddle shifters, you love them or you hate them. I don't really mind them. At least these paddles are nice and tall, so you don't have to reach for them too much. This engine is so boosted in terms of the response. It can catch you off guard if you're in the middle of the rev range and you're a little too aggressive with the pedal. R35 GTR, man. I love this car. I really do. This is a car I would love to own someday. Hell, I would daily an R35 GTR. It's not the most practical car in the world, but you can definitely squeeze a couple of smaller adults in the back. For $70,000, this is pretty hard to argue with. I mean, for this price point, what does this even compete with? If you want a high horsepower, dynamically engaging sports coupe, used G80 M3, I mean, I've done that comparison, M4 Competition X-Drive versus R35 GTR, and the R35 is dynamically way more exciting and engaging to drive. I guess you could get a 981 GTS Cayman, which is a fantastic car, but it's not as interesting as a GTR. The driving dynamics of that car are basically just like any other highly competent Porsche. So what other options are you left with? If you want something that really feels unique, has road presence, isn't something that you'll see a dozen of at every car show, the R35 GTR is still one of the best bang for buck driver's cars for under $70,000 to $80,000. I think it's much harder to make an argument for a newer model year in the $100,000 to, I mean, even up to $200,000 range for some of the Nismo models. I've never driven a Nismo, would love to someday, but on paper, I just can't fathom how it would be 2.5 times the car that this is. So let me know what you think. of the R35 GTR. Which model year is your favorite? Which one do you think offers the best bang for buck? A huge shout out to Oleg for letting me review his R35. Definitely one of my favorite all-wheel drive cars of all time. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you very soon.